Hey everyone, thanks for joining us this week on our expert interview series. And this week, I'm super excited to have Morgan Meese joining us. She was actually on one of our earlier podcast episodes talking about starting a cash pay practice. And we've had a lot of kind of change in her business over the past year or so. And Morgan's kind of evolved how she's been working in her business with clients and so on. And I thought it'd be really good for her to come back on and really talk about what she's referring to as like the lean kind of startup. There's a lot of people who are entering in the healthcare industry who are really entering the next level of their careers and thinking, hey, I'm not really happy where I'm working now, maybe due to whatever specific political situation is going on at their workplace, or maybe they're just at the cap where they just want to move out and kind of go on to their own. And a lot of people have that kind of uncertainty and fear of wondering like, well, how do I do this? What steps do I go to? And so on. So Morgan's an absolute expert at being able to really take the reins and hop off, the regular sort of employee route and go to that entrepreneurial route. So I wanted to bring her on and kind of share a little bit about that journey. So thanks for joining us today, Morgan, and maybe tell us a little bit about yourself for those of you who don't already know you.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me back again, Brad. Always a pleasure to come and hang out with you. Yeah, for everybody who might not have met me before, my name's Morgan Meese. I'm a physical therapist and currently living in Las Vegas, Nevada. A little bit about me. I graduated in 2018 and moved out here with my fiance, who's also a PT, and he works in the hospital system. We have a dog named Goni, which we did name after a goniometer.
Really,
We
eh?
both
That's
do.
funny. Didn't know
Yeah.
that.
It's like super nerdy, but it's fine. Yeah, we both stay pretty active. We do CrossFit. I ride my Peloton bike, and like Brad was saying, I basically like most of my life right now is about entrepreneurship and growing my business and helping other people grow their businesses as well. I started my own cash practice in 2019, and I started working with athletes. I was working with them out of a gym, and then with the pandemics, transitioned everybody over into telehealth. And now I currently work with people either online, virtually, or in my garage gym. I will see patients, and I am also a business and marketing coach for other therapists and healthcare providers who are wanting to, get out of kind of like the rat race, like Brad was saying, like you're sick of it. You want to do something new and different and fulfilling. And I help people now go from basically ground zero to running their own solo cash based practice and living their dreams.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it's super important because a lot of times people get stuck into, really hating where they are and it can start to burn people out. I know there's lots of people that, I went to school with and kept in touch with that are really just not happy, whether it's working in the hospital or they're working in a PT mill or, kind of equivalent practice. They kind of feel stuck. So I think it's probably good to start like, if you're in that state, like what's sort of the first step that you kind of take? You said you've had it where you are, or you just want something else. Like what was sort of like the first step that you take on moving towards, kind of starting up your lean practice, but also making sure you're feeling confident in the decision that you're making, because there's a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah, for sure. And I know that's something that I talk to a lot of people about. And like I myself have felt that way, still feel that way with new things that I do, where it can be really scary and overwhelming and intimidating to do something that you've never done before, and like one way that I like to kind of like change the perspective on it sometimes when people tell me that they're scared to do something that they've never done before, and that's like been holding them back and keeping them from kind of like pulling the trigger with this is, like remember when you were in school and you were doing your very first like clinical rotation. You had never done that before, but you still did it, and you learned as you went. And it was okay to continue to learn and grow and improve every time that did a new thing, started working at a new place. And so I think, kind of like the first thing, and I've been I just put out a YouTube video about this because I think it's important to talk about, not just like the logistics of starting up a business and starting up a practice, needing an LLC or whatever it is, but like, what do you need before you start checking off kind of like those just tasks on a list? Like, what do you need in order to be successful in your startup? And so, one of the first things that I would consider, or urge people to think about is, if you're wanting to try this, if you just about had it, you want a way out, you need to take responsibility for what you're going to be doing next. So like I know that it might be hard, it might be difficult, and you might feel like there's not enough time, you're always tired, but you need to take responsibility and not make excuses and just put in a little bit of effort, every day, every week, and start to learn what it is that you need in order to grow a business. Because I think if we allow ourselves to stay stuck, like we're the only ones who are doing that. We also have the power to allow ourselves to get unstuck, so to speak.
Totally. And I always tell people it's like kind of a mindset shift, and it's maybe the unpopularized, demotivating opinion. But I think that you need to have a guiding light, so to speak, that is bigger than, hey, I just don't like my boss, I'm going to go work for myself, or I want to make tons of money. Those are good motivating factors, but at the end of the day, you've got to really have that North Star, because times are going to be difficult in your practice. You're going to have to maybe overextend yourself for a period of time, especially if you're full time and you're trying to sort of grow your business and that kind of thing as well. So, what are sort of your, like, do you have like a checklist or something that you can really dial in so people know kind of like what they're getting into, and also they have a little bit more to kind of push through, because there's a lot of people I've talked to months ago, and I talk with them again or follow up, and they're nowhere any further than they were 3 months ago, and that kind of stuff. And sometimes it's like, well, life got in the way, or it's not a priority, or I need to make money. Like, what are some of the key sort of things you have set up so that way people can be more successful, or kind of like, I guess when you are starting, you have to get done, absolutely have to get done.
Yeah, I think, it takes a couple of things, like you were saying, there has to be a mindset shift, and some people are very good at doing that on their own and being like very self-motivated, and a lot of people need help. Like that might be one reason that you look into hiring some kind of a coach or some kind of like person to be your external accountability to help you move forward, and like you were saying about having like that North Star, like there has to be like something within you, and sometimes I struggle to like find a way to put this into words, but there has to be like no other option. Like if you make the purposeful decision to start a practice, or even just like starting to look into how to start a practice, it has to be something within you that just like motivates you to move forward, and continue to go along this journey. And so I guess like if you're somebody out there who is looking into getting started with this, and you feel like life is just always in the way, like that's just something that I too have heard a lot, like there's always something. And so one thing that I like to remember is that like there's never going to be a perfect time. There's never going to be a perfect time to start making moves towards whatever goal it is that you have. And so if we keep letting that come up, we're never going to be able to make a change. So if you're in this place where like you feel like life is always in the way, one thing, like one kind of like tactical thing that I suggest to people when I talk to them about it, is to take a look at your schedule, like your weekly schedule, and see when you can set aside 1 hour a week and like use that time to help yourself get kickstarted. Like 1 hour a week that you dedicate to just yourself, your self growth, your learning, like your business knowledge, whatever it is, and purposely choose to do that so that you can move forward. And if you're just getting started with doing that, set aside an hour this weekend where you sit down and figure out what to do the following weekend. You can go slow. That's the other thing that I like to remind people too, is that it doesn't have to be a race. You can go at whatever pace you want, but especially if you're working full time, don't feel like there has to be like a lot of pressure on you to go as fast as you can. You can do that if you want to, but you don't have to. So I hope that kind of answers your question.
Yeah, totally. And I think that comes to like another point that uh, I hear a lot from people, and it's they get in the mindset where you've got some people who are like, yeah, I'm going to do everything. It's going to be amazing. I'm going to be running ads. I'm going to go out. They're thinking of all these kind of things, and they kind of like overestimate what they can get done and sort of underestimate the amount of time it's going to take. So I think that that's an important thing for people, especially listening, because I mean, people who are listening to this are probably going to be a little bit more motivated and so on. Otherwise, they wouldn't be listening to here. So, what are some ways that you found to sort of make sure people are focusing on the right things, but also, making sure they're able to actually get accomplishments down? Because I know a lot of times when I speak to people, they get kind of like feeling defeated, like they put in all of this
Mhm.
work. I remember speaking to someone yesterday, and they're like, "Well, I've done all of these things. I have no money. I've got like two patients. It's been 3 months," and she's feeling discouraged, but she's spending a lot of time doing things that are not the right thing. She's got a business card, she's got her website up. Debatable whether it's going to convert anything, but the colors are picked out, all of these things that she did, and then she's disappointed she's not getting a result, but she's not quite able to see sort of the connection. So what are sort of the ideal things, like you're ready to go, you've got some time dedicated, that people need to be taking action on right away in order to get them moving? Because our first goal is really you need to get patients on the schedule. Otherwise, nothing else matters, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I love this question because I am all about lists and like breaking things up and having like a clear, like concrete path in order to move forward. And this is actually like this is the same structure that I walk people through in my coaching program. Because in like the reason that I set it up this way too is to kind of like connect with the point that you had about like feeling motivated or demotivated, and not anyway, like finding like a path and like building on the like small wins over time. So this is the way that I have it structured, is that it's segmented into 5 distinct phases right now. And we conquer one phase at a time. And so then that way, like for people like me who like checking things off lists, it's very gratifying to be able to say like, okay, I've done all the things, like I'm moving in the right direction and I don't need to feel like I'm like spinning my wheels or like my brain is all over the place. So, say you're this person and you've made the conscious decision you're going to do it. You've set aside your hour a week and you want to know what you should be focusing on so far. The 5 phases that I have are one, like business setup. I have a checklist that's in my ebook on like this is what you need to do in order to have a business entity and be ready to see patients tomorrow if you wanted to. And just like having that list, I think helps so many people. Because I know like when I was in school, like I didn't learn anything about like how to start a business at all. And that is like one piece that I think holds people back a lot, is they just don't know what they need. So I put together a list, and it's just, here's how you set up a business entity. This is everything you need in order to see a patient tomorrow, just so that like you're legit and ready to go. So business setup is phase one. Phase two is a piece that I call practice by design. And it's basically like figure out who you are, who you serve, and what you sell. So that when you do go to do all of the marketing and everything, like you have an understanding of what you're even trying to do so that you can communicate it to other people. Because I feel like I talk to a lot of clinicians who are just getting started, and they're always concerned about the marketing piece. Like, I need to pick a logo, I need to do my website, I need to make brochures, but they don't have any understanding of what they're even, trying to sell or what their marketing message is. And so, like, it makes it really hard for those marketing tools to be effective if we don't have an understanding of what we're doing. And so that's the second piece, is figuring out what we're doing. Phase number three is
Well,
what,
I just want to add
yeah,
something to that for people
yeah,
listening, because I think that is a huge component that people overlook, and they get
yeah,
stuck into like brand marketing as opposed to direct marketing. And the direct marketing is about the problems you solve, and that's why people buy. They don't buy because of your logo that you spent 5 hours doing. And also the approach is like, when you're going, you need to be solving problems, and a lot of time people are promoting, just get out there, get your name out there and hustle. And the reality is that like people are indoctrinated to like getting pitched all the time. COVID, there's restrictions and that kind of stuff. So if you're just going in with a shiny new brochure and a card to like a doctor's office, you're probably not going to get in there. So I think that there's a lot of marketing that people have been doing that is kind of like, it kind of works to a degree, but not as effectively as, I call it dinosaur marketing. Like there's more efficient ways at doing it. And I think like what you said there is a key component that people must get. It's like, what problem are you solving? Who do you solve it for? And how do you explain it to someone so that they can simply understand it? And by someone, your ideal types of patients, not other practitioners, right? What are your thoughts on that?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like, I am a huge fan of like plain English, and just trying to be like as simple as possible, because we have all of these kind of like therapy or clinical words that, like you and I understand, like we get it, but we have to find a way to bridge the gap between like the way that we communicate how we can help people and what our ideal clients, are open and receptive to and can like sink their teeth into what it is that you do. And I totally agree with you on kind of like the dinosaur like marketing tactics, so to speak. Like, that's one of the biggest problems that I see. And like I've been guilty of it, so like I'm not just, spouting from the rooftops or whatever, but I call it kind of like the difference between like active and passive marketing. The passive pieces I kind of look at as like handing out business cards or brochures or flyers, and like not like putting on all these materials and putting them out there, and then just like hoping and praying that somebody sees your stuff and says like, oh yeah, like I should go and pay this person to do therapy to me. Like, it's very like one dimensional almost. But like we live in a time right now where more than ever, like people are looking for connection, and like you were saying, like people get pitched all the time, and so you have to find a way to not only like put your best self out there with whatever your brand is, but like that's not it. You can't stop there. You have to find a way to continue to put information out there to develop know, like, and trust with your audience so that they have an understanding of, okay, Morgan does this thing. I can understand why this will or will not help me. I like her. She seems to be okay. And also I trust her because she knows what she's talking about. And building that kind of relationship with somebody and then establishing a connection with them is going to get you a lot further faster than just putting up kind of like these stereotypical like marketing materials, so to speak.
Totally vague messaging, as I kind of call it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. And I guess maybe go back to number three we were on, and
Oh yeah.
try to finish these off.
Yeah,
I interrupted you, so
so
I apologize.
no, no, that's okay. Yeah, kind of going back to my 5-step process. Part three kind of goes into like what we were just talking about. Like earlier this year, I made a challenge called the 100 challenge. And like the whole goal of it was to be able to connect with 100 different people. And like the purpose was not to try to reach out to people to try to sell them things, like all that's all fine and good if it happens. But the purpose was to practice your like outreach, relationship building skills and communication skills so that you got by the end of talking to 100 people, you would be crystal clear on, who it is that you are, what it is you're trying to offer, and identifying different opportunities that might come up where you could continue to expand your reach. And work with other professionals, work with other patients, whatever it is, because like that's another thing that will keep people back if you're being really passive about your marketing, and you're afraid to talk to people. It makes it really hard to sell things, and to build kind of like your reputation so that people do start to eventually notice and start to work their way towards you. So that's kind of like piece three. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's super important. And like the big problem that I have is that people will teach you just get out and talk to people. And the reality is it's not talking to people, it's building relationships. And the principles of understanding on how to connect with people and really ultimately what you can do is try to solve problems or understand them is a huge component to like networking and joint ventures and that kind of thing. And you don't need to go and hit the pavement and just go out. I've heard people going out for hours. Business coach tell them, go out, talk to every single business owner there and drop off cards. Like it's just not efficient. You really only need a small amount of people. Like for me, when I first got out of school, I had a chiro, a physio, and naturopath doctor that referred me people. And those were my 3 JVs. I had other people that would refer, but those were the primary ones that were giving me a lot of clients and patients, and I was referring backwards that way. So I think it's important to like surround yourself. I talk about in joint ventures, like in the modules and stuff, talking about, you want to find ideal people that you can align with and not just going out and talking to the guy who like repairs shoes or selling pizza. Like, those are things you can build omnipresence for in the future, but you want to find the right people and build the right connections. Those are the things that are going to exponentially be more beneficial. I'm more of like the sniper approach, so to speak, and being more strategic with how I'm setting those up instead of just blasting out to every single person. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I love that. And I totally understand that approach and everything. Like I think, maybe it's kind of like a level one thing, could be like if you were just like completely paralyzed to talk to anybody at all, maybe a good like initial approach is to like, talk to somebody who's maybe not the right fit because there's no pressure
So you
on
don't
you
mess shit up. Yeah.
at all, like there's no like they're not for you,
Yeah.
or it's just somebody who like wouldn't be necessarily a patient, so like your grandma or somebody, like just practicing like building that relationship, and being open to just like talking to people. And like once you get past that kind of like initial fear of like, oh my god, like I have to talk to a stranger, or whoever it is, then being a lot more efficient and strategic about your outreach, I feel like is really beneficial. So then it's not just like all the time just like hitting the pavement, and going door to door, but you like spend that initial piece like learning how to get over the fear and learning how to talk to people, and then you can move on to really making your time doing that the most effective that it can be.
Yeah, totally. I think that's a good point, um, for those who are a little bit more worried, or it can feel a little bit overwhelming. I think when you first start,
Hmm.
but it's not going to get any easier. And I sort of say it's like once you start doing it, it just becomes second nature. And
Right.
once you've done it, then it makes it a lot easier. I think going forward, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so that's kind of, going back to like something you originally said for people who feel like they're, doing all of the things, but not really getting anywhere. Coming back to kind of some of like these basics, I think is a good thing, like always going back to basics. And then, if they're doing all the things, taking time to evaluate all the things you're doing and figuring out like what's going well, what's not going well, why is it not going well and what can I improve, I think can be really helpful too. Like purposely doing self-reflection like that or business reflection or whatever, instead of like continuing to beat a dead horse, so to speak, too.
Yeah, 100%. Too many times people, they do things that are not working and expect different results.
Right.
Yeah, not a good or efficient way of your time.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so yeah, I mean, like kind of the whole big question, if like you want to make a conscious decision to get started with your practice right now, those are kind of like the three initial steps is set up, figure out what you're doing, and get out, and talk to people and then talk to the right people. Like we've talked about here. And I mean, the last two steps of my program are then like learning how to sell things, which is also often foreign to most people. And the cool thing about it is that it's really just learning more communication skills. Like it's not anything like icky or weird, but like you're just learning again to continue to build relationships with somebody and learn how to really like listen to them and understand what problems they might have and if your services are a good fit. And last piece is really like digital marketing, and getting yourself out there, getting like your name out there, so to speak, but in a way that continues to build that trust with your audience and with the right people, with the right community, and creating more opportunities where you can step in and potentially offer to help people.
Awesome. I love it. And I think it makes a logical kind of, a logical sort of step in making sure people are kind of getting all their bases together and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, so like let's say, someone's going through those 5 steps,
Mm-hmm.
um, and they're kind of growing their practice and sort of feeling like they're maybe stuck or things are not going so well. What are sort of some things that you recommend, so that way we can almost kind of catch ourselves and make sure that we're not hitting a plateau, or we're not getting to a time essentially like where we are feeling like, hey, we're not really making progress, maybe this is not the right fit for me, I'm just going to go back and work. Because I think there is a point where you've almost got to make that decision and say, I'm either going all in on this business and I'm going to leave my current position, or I'm kind of like going to have to just sort of give it up, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a really great question. And so I guess maybe like the way that I kind of like tell or suggest to people like how to transition from working full time to working full time in their business is, typically if you're working full time, I would suggest, because this is the way that I did it and I kind of liked it, going from full time to part time to PRN to business full time, instead of taking like the giant leap, from full time to just full time business owner. Lots of people do that and it can be really effective and obviously the most efficient. But I know that some people out there are a little bit scared to do that. And so for anybody listening, like I just want you to know that it's totally okay, like whichever way you want to do it. But there are definitely like pros and cons to both approaches. And so say like I think, kind of what you were talking about is maybe you're working like part-time or PRN and also like part-time on your business. Like you're wondering what to kind of like tell somebody, or like what necessarily like needs to be like the breaking point before somebody like chooses to go into their business full time or not. Is that kind of like the question you're asking?
Yeah, because you get a lot of people that are sort of like, they're feeling like, hey, you know what, I don't have any more time left, I need to make a decision, like, am I going to do this full time and give up my business, or like how does it kind of work? Because I know there's a lot of people who kind of ride that line, of is this a real thing or not? And I think sometimes people almost, it's scary to leave like that, to shift to uncertainty. Like myself, I've never really been employed ever, other than when I was really young. So I've been, always, really doing my own thing in one way or another. So especially with healthcare, like my entire career essentially. So for me, it's a little bit easier, and probably for you because you were right out of school. But there's a lot of people who've got like that consistent paycheck and so on, right? So what's sort of that, like, how do you make that decision, or how do you, sort of overcome that worry or that uncertainty?
Yeah. Um, well, I talked to one of my clients about it the other night. And like one thing that I kind of like to do is sort of like a thought experiment is if somebody, like we were talking about, so the other night we were talking about them wanting to go full time in their practice, but they're currently working full time and like they just want to know basically this question, like when should they leave their full-time job. And I think we really have to consider like one, like what do you really want? And I think that's an important question because I think there are a lot of people out there who want to have a business and they start it, and they do okay, but maybe they think because they see so many people online starting businesses that they have to, because like everybody's doing it, so like they should be doing it, but it might not be necessarily like truly aligned with them and like what they really want to do. So I think that's like one piece, is to be really honest with yourself about like if running a business and having, basically like you being in charge of all the things, like if that's what you really want to do and why, or would you rather have like the comfortable paycheck, and either one is totally okay, but we like can't be like fooling ourselves either way. And so like if you are somebody who's kind of like played in the business game and kind of figured out that it's not really for you, that's okay. Like you can always just go back to your regular job and maybe try a business again in the future. But if you're at this place where like you truly are wanting this business and you're kind of like out of time, out of energy and like something has to give, I like to help people make like tangible goals. Whether it's you have like 3 months left at this job. So in 2 months, you're going to turn in your 30 days notice. So what do we need to do in order to get prepared for that? Or, we're going to reach a certain income level. And at that income level, we're going to turn in our notice. And you're going to go into your business. And like that, I think sometimes can offer people a little bit of clarity in knowing like when exactly to leave their job and go into their business instead of just like kind of being in this like gray weird space of I don't I don't know what to do, like I'm kind of miserable all the time because I don't have time or energy or anything, but having like that specific goal and like specific checkpoint, I think can be helpful.
Totally. And I think one thing I'd like to get your opinion on too is that
Yeah.
there's some stages, and one thing that comes up occasionally I hear is people are starting business because they have to. Like they have no money and they don't really have time, and they're doing it out of like kind of scarcity. And I sort of see that as like that desperation generally doesn't work out because like, I mean, there's some people who kind of overcome it and so on, but there are a lot of the time there's people who are doing it because they think they're going to make tons of money, and they're coming from a place of desperation. What are your thoughts on that process, or like how do you kind of navigate people who probably, I kind of say sometimes like should probably just be an employee for the time being until they can get to themselves into a more sort of logistically suitable position.
Yeah, sure. Um, so feeling like I think overall, like there definitely does feel like just societally like a lot of pressure to make enough money because of all the bills that we have, and like I know that student loan debt for a lot of us is a big thing, that like not even our full-time income, like we might have our full-time job and it's just enough to cover everything, and kind of break even at the end of the month. And so it's like, well, what do we do? Like what else can we do? And so like lots of people will start a business, like you were saying, as a means to make more income. And I think like if you're doing it like just because you're looking for a way to make like extra cash or make like a lot of money quickly, it's probably not like the most sustainable business plan. Um, and like you said, like it might be better to just be an employee, so maybe you do pick up a PRN job, or you do any of like the apps, like do Uber or Instacart or something to make some extra money. But like if you're not starting a business from a place of like wanting to better yourself, wanting to better things for your clients and your patients, like wanting to do things a better way, and having a passion behind like the mission that you're on. Like those are the key things that I would look for, that would kind of like determine like if somebody's going to be able to do this long term. Versus I think like if it's kind of the other pieces, there might just be like better options out there. Because like ultimately, if you're doing it and it's not necessarily like for the right reasons, you're just going to end up putting like a lot more stress on yourself. Um, and that's not not fun. Like that's not a good time. And I think like now more than ever, like we also have to be making sure that we're taking care of ourselves. And not just like working full throttle all the time, because we think like we have to, I guess.
Totally, yeah. Quality of life can go down, and we need to. You're playing the long game, I think, is that's a big thing too. Is that you know when we get worried about like money and stuff like that, the reality is unless you plan on dying tomorrow, you've got time. So, and if you plan on dying tomorrow, you might live your day a little bit differently. But the big thing is we want to really make sure that like what you're doing is laying foundations. And when I talk to a lot of people about business and marketing and that kind of stuff, I never work with people who are doing it out of desperation, because they never can make great decisions, in my opinion. And I've been in positions where things are really stressful and so on. But the only thing that can make you the only thing that can make you get to a position where ultimately you're making better decisions is you've got to be playing the long game. You've got to have something that's kind of that North Star,
Mhm.
to make sure that you can make good decisions and so on. And making sure that you're going from zero to fully booked in the first month. Yeah, you could definitely do that, but you've got to have the right processes and systems and stuff in place, and you need to be building off of like each other and foundation. And I think sometimes people get into it either thinking that it's going to be really easy, or they get into it thinking like, hey, I need to do this really fast. And the reality is like you're really building an asset. If you're building your own clinic or your business, like you're building something that is going to, you want to last a long time. You don't want to be doing tactics that are, Groupons or something to like grow your business quick, and then you are not sustainable. Like you want to have a long, sustainable business that's going to, kind of pay you back, unless you're building something to sell, I guess.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'd love to talk a little bit about um, like your thoughts on cash pay versus insurance, because I get a lot of questions on that as well. And for me, like I've always been cash pay, so I'm curious like what your sort of thoughts are and so on.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So I am definitely like upfront, like team cash pay, like 100%. And I think it's been really interesting just like talking to a lot of different therapists over the past couple of years, about like the whole insurance versus cash thing. And I think that there are like definitely pros and cons to both. And like you can also be there's kind of like a few different camps. Like you could obviously be like all in network with insurances. You could bill out of network for all the insurances. You could be like cash and Medicare, for example, where it's like a little bit of insurance, but only for a specific population, or like completely all cash based, which is what like I consider myself to be because I don't like unless somebody asks for a super bill, I don't give my patients a super bill, and like it just makes things like a lot easier. So I guess like some pros for cash is I just like to make sure that things are like as streamlined as possible with like most stuff that I do. And with what I know about billing insurance and being like a single member practice, I just always thought it would be like a lot easier and more straightforward to keep things cash based, where like the payments are just between me and the client. Everything's all, you know, upfront, like above board. And like there's nothing crazy about it. And you know, I think that that's kind of part of the way that like I just conduct business is very like honest and straightforward.
Yeah.
And so I really like that. Versus like sometimes with insurance I feel like there could be situations where like a price that something is like quoted, it could like there's just like so much ambiguity around insurance that I don't really like that. But some people are like billing whizzes and they know all the things. You know, and it does take time to learn how to bill insurance, but it seems like once you kind of figure it out, you know, it can be a great way to treat another set like of people, you know, in a different population. So those are just some kind of like initial thoughts. Do you have like specific like topics about it or anything?
Yeah, I think it's like a lot of time people go to insurance because they think it's like low hanging fruit and they don't have to like work as hard. Especially here in like Canada, like people use insurance because they can go get physio for free down the road. So why would they go and pay? So people get sort of lazy and rely on that instead of like maybe learning skill sets, or you've got to market or sell a little bit better for cash pay, right? And I'm sure like the patients are going to be different in terms of your messaging and how your sales processes and indoctrination and all that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah, I think so, you know, and I think that's another big part of it is with cash pay and honestly with like paying any kind of professional out of pocket, you know, like I think it makes both you and the professional show up in a little bit different of a way. That's a little bit like more committed, you know, and more compliant with the plan of care. And it's like a lot more about like, let's get the outcome that we desire versus like sometimes I think you know when we like some patients potentially might think that like just by using their insurance, you know, like it's not as serious, like they don't have to be held as accountable because like they're not paying for it anyway.
Yes.
So you know, it's just like I think that's kind of hard. You know, and I think like a lot of us who want to start our own practices, like we're in it, like we want to help the patients, and like some of the best ways to do that is by offering like a cash-based service or not a pocket service, because you get a different level of commitment, I think, than you might with an insurance-based client. And that is kind of like a big like blanket statement and everything. And obviously like a lot of it has to do with like your ability to you know, set expectations with your patients. But that's kind of been my experience so far, and it's definitely made things like a lot less stressful, and like my patients have been happy too. That's all just been like really clear and upfront.
Yeah, totally. And I've always just had been more of a fan of cash pay because um, I didn't want to compete with all of the like sort of insurance payouts and everything else that kind of decline, especially here in Canada and so on. And it's harder to differentiate when people are like fixed on like using benefits or insurance. So I remember when I was first working in my clinic, everyone's like, you have to do insurance. No one's going to pay cash and so on. And I remember charging like, I think I was charging like $130 like right out of school. And people are like, no one's going to pay that, especially cash. But I had really good experience from explain how to communicate and explain the processes for personal training. So I always kind of went cash pay because insurance, there was like, they would pay you a certain amount and they would take like 5 weeks to pay you. And there was all these kind of problems. So I said, I don't want to add friction. Like at the end of the day, my job is to get the patient results. And I don't want to be, someone saying to me, well, I've only got $1,000 that I can spend because that's how much my insurance is. And it's like, well, you're literally going to live with a problem for the rest of your life if you don't deal with this kind of thing. So yeah, it's always good to get people's experience on that sort of process.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I think, like totally agree with you on like the patient side of things and like not wanting to add extra friction and just like all these extra things. Like it's just like too much extra stuff. Like let's just like fix the problem. Like, like
Yeah,
let's do something that's going to take you where you want to go with your goals and getting better. And I think like I also always like to encourage people, who are, especially like if you're working full time and you're considering doing your own practice, like you don't have time to try to figure out how insurance billing works on your own, like when your goal is to get patients in the door. Like your selling point should not be on the fact that you can be the cheapest. Otherwise, like, what are we doing? Like we don't want to be known as like the cheapest service around because like we take whatever insurance, like we want to be known for our quality, potentially convenience, and just like the high level of service that we offer. Um, and so, like, if you're spinning your wheels trying to figure out all this extra stuff on your own, and that's preventing you from even getting patients in the first place, like, it's not going to be successful long term. And I think it's just a lot easier to start as a cash practice, whether you do it long term or not. But starting there and helping yourself transition out of your employment position, it's a lot easier. And then you can always look into taking insurance down the road.
totally. And yeah, I always advocate for cash pay, personally. So another really, big topic that I'd love to get your opinion on
Yeah.
for startups, and this is going to be a good one. I think, it'll ruffle some feathers is pricing strategy.
Uh-huh.
I'll know a lot of people who start out and they undercharge where they are. So for example, I kind of see a couple of problems and curious to get sort of what you see, but people, let's say they work at a clinic, they're charging 150 an hour. They'll charge what they get. Maybe they get paid 80, they'll charge 80 or 100. Because they're in their mind, they're saying, well, I'm getting all of that money to me and it's worth it and that kind of stuff. So they kind of really undercharge. Or they look and say, well, what are other people doing that are mobile, or what other physical therapist or massage or whatever, what are other people charging? And I would say that your pricing really needs to be based and reflected on like the outcomes you're providing and your positioning, and not just arbitrarily picked because, well, three places charge 100, so I'm going to do 90 or whatever. So I'm curious, like, where should people start with this?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. And like it's so interesting because there are so many different ways to price things and like there are so many people who are successful doing it like in all kinds of ways. And like I love what you're saying about like pricing things based on the outcome. And I know like when I was first getting started with my practice, like I had a really hard time with that concept because like it had always been like in school, in my job, like it was, even with insurance, whatever it is, like it's a certain like copay per session, and like that's just always like the structure that I had visualized in my mind. And so like transitioning from that to like an outcome based pricing model, I think can be really hard to conceptualize for people who are new to this. And so like what I typically have people start with, because again, like we just need to make a decision and move forward, and then we can continue to improve upon things as we continue forward in this journey. Like I typically have people kind of look at like their pricing, whether it's like in the area, or we consider like what they're wanting their monthly income to be and how many treatment slots they have available and break it down by session, just so we have like something to kind of latch on to when we're first getting started. And then we can kind of go from there. And I think that like the transition between like selling session to session to session to selling like a full outcome can be kind of a big like bridge to go over. Like I don't know, have you seen this with like people that you've worked with as well, or not so much?
Yes, sometimes, and sometimes when I'm having conversations with people, they kind of get stuck into it,
Mm-hmm.
and they're really like they get really hung up on it.
Yeah, yeah, I know. And like, and that's the thing is like I try to like help, like you said, kind of like decrease the friction as much as possible so we can just get going and start seeing results as quickly as we can. But thinking kind of like long term and like what you want to be known for, like as a professional, you don't necessarily want to be known as the person who's $150 an hour. Like you want to be known as the person who can help somebody fix their problem, and whatever like amount of time or whatever like price it might be, like it is what it is. So I think it's really interesting, and there are just like so many different ways to sell things, right? Like selling session to session, selling packages of sessions, selling a plan of care, kind of like what you're saying with like an outcome based situation, selling memberships, like whatever it is. Um, I guess like maybe my question to you might be like, how do you help people like cross that bridge from like going like selling session to session to selling like these outcome based plans of cares?
Yeah, I mean, like a part of kind of how I say pricing wise is um, it's pretty important, but most people don't do this. Is from a pricing standpoint is how much money do you want to make and how many hours do you want to work? Like at the end of the day,
Mhm.
like if you're a solo practitioner, what does that look like for you? If you want to make $10,000 a month, but you're going to charge $60 an hour, you're going to have to work significantly more hours than if you're charging 150, right? So
Mhm.
logistically, I look at, well, how much money do you actually want to make? And reverse engineer it from there. It's as simple as that sounds. And then ultimately, it comes down to, is that somewhat reasonable, or can I get the results, or who is most likely that I'm passionate and able to help that's going to facilitate or charge that, pay that amount of money. So that's kind of where I sort of first start.
Mhm.
And then in terms of plans of care, like part of it, it's like how you really work with your marketing. So like with the clients that we work with, the first sort of stage is that attract phase. And the first sort of submodule in that attract phase is based on positioning and your marketing message and so on. So I actually start to reinvent how the business is operating and how it's being seen. So that way we're able to put together a little bit more specific messaging, positioning in the marketplace, our offers, and that kind of stuff. I always start with what I refer to as like the patient success journey, which essentially is why the business exists, and then engineer it around there. So we start to preemptively market and communicate to patients like what are the next steps. And the next step is always talking about, the next step is, coming in for initial appointment. The next step is doing a plan of care for that initial issue. And then the next step is to go into like a maintenance plan so you can maintain where you are and that kind of stuff. So part of it is like engineering what the business, why the business exists in the structure, and then starting to slot in the communication points that allow the patients to understand, what you're doing.
Yeah, and I love that. And I think like that's kind of like a concept that I've been thinking about a lot lately is like, like you're saying like coming up with this patient success journey where like you as the provider are the leader in the relationship, and somebody is going to come to you and pay you for your services for you to be that leader and to guide them from point A to point B. And I think that that's something that just like it takes you as the practice owner and the clinician to the next level if you can step into that leadership role in the relationship and like confidently and assertively tell somebody like what they need to do next in order to continue to get the result. And like setting those expectations at each like segment of the journey and saying like this is it. Like here's the next step. This is what we need to do next in order to get your desired result. Like I feel like if I've learned one thing about like sales and just building relationships with patients in the past couple of years, like that kind of like confidence and leadership in that position will carry you so much further than trying to sheepishly tell somebody like it's $150 a session, but instead like taking that role and saying like, okay, Mr. Jones, like I understand like you're having an issue with XYZ. Our next step is an initial session and evaluation. Are you open to that? Great, like we'll do that. And then at that evaluation, telling them what the initial plan will be in order to help them move forward. And I feel like it works so well, not only in terms of like sales and everything, but like it just establishes such a clear plan for both you and your patient moving forward that it ultimately makes things like a lot more effective and a more enjoyable experience as well.
Totally. And in my opinion, that's like one of the most critical things you can do because people need clarity. They're coming to you for clarity. And the more that you can give them clarity in terms of what they need,
Mm-hmm.
the better options that they're going to have. And if you don't establish yourself as that professional and it's like, well, let me know when you want to come back and you're being passive, in my opinion, you're doing a disservice to that patient.
Right.
And, ultimately you're not setting anyone up for success. So, people get a lot into, well, what if they say no or rejection? The reality is you need to do what's best for the patient. And like when I
Mm-hmm.
was in school, it's all, you've got to be that kind of, you can't let personal emotions and all that kind of stuff run in. You need to help people. And ultimately, at the end of the day, if they don't value their health enough or the problem that they want to solve, then that's on them. You're not the one who has the low back pain that they want to solve and go and play golf again. Like you give people options and they either take them or they don't. And it's just the reality. Obviously the better you can communicate, you're going to have less, but I think that that's a huge point. And I always relate this as I see physios, especially physios, say, well, those personal trainers are, they're selling all these packages and we can't sell. And the reality is coming from a personal trainer when I did it, is that we are really good. Like you're selling something intangible and you need to have, and trainers do this really well, not everyone, but a lot of the really good ones explain what the process and transformation is.
Mm-hmm.
And, I took those concepts into therapy when I started treating, and it made a huge difference because now people can conceptualize what exactly they're looking at getting, what the process is. They have clarity. And when people have clarity and certainty, it allows them to make the decisions that they're going to show up and they're going to